Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the sweaty, smoky life of a medieval blacksmith, hammering away in a world where every nail counts. Picture this: you're standing in a cramped forge, the air thick with soot, your hands gripping a heavy hammer as sparks fly from glowing iron. It's 1370 in a muddy English village, and the winter chill sneaks through the open doorway, fighting the forge's heat. You're not some fancy knight or well-fed monk. Oh no, you're a blacksmith, and let's be real, you probably won't survive a week without burning your hands or your patience. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the forge, the heart of your world, where the fire roars and the anvil waits. It's a small shed, barely more than a lean-to, with walls of wattle and daub and a dirt floor packed hard from years of pacing. The cold's biting outside, but in here, it's a battle between frost and flame. You're already sweating, your tunic sticking to your back. As you pump the bellows to stoke the fire, medieval blacksmiths were essential, historical records tell us, crafting everything from horseshoes to swords for villages that depended on their skill. Without you, plows break, hooves go unshod, and the Lord's knights are swinging dull blades. The fire's your lifeline, but it's a fickle one. You're working with charcoal wood's too smoky and coal's not common yet, and it's burning fast. You toss in another chunk, watching sparks swirl like tiny stars. The heat's intense, drying your throat, but the doorway's letting in drafts that chill your legs. You're wearing a rough wool tunic and a leather apron, both scorched and stained. No gloves, those are for rich folks, so your hands are already calloused, with a fresh burn stinging your thumb. You joke to yourself, if I burn off my fingers, I'll hammer with my toes. It's not funny, but it keeps you sane. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some blacksmiths believed spitting into the forge fire brought good luck, like it pleased the spirits of the flame. You're not sure about spirits, but you give it a try. Spitting into the coals, it sizzles, and you mutter, "Better work, or I'm spitting at the Lord next." The fire flares briefly, and you take it as a win. You're hammering now, shaping a red-hot iron bar into a plowshare. The clang echoes, loud enough to drown out the wind. Your arms ache, but you keep going. Farmers need this by dawn, and they're not patient. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were respected craftsmen or just overworked grunts. Some say you were the village's backbone, while others think you were seen as dirty, noisy outcasts. You're leaning toward outcast because nobody's brought you bread lately. The anvil's your altar, though, and you're pounding away like it's a prayer. You glance at the doorway, where snow's starting to drift in. The village is quiet, but you know it's counting on you. Your kid's asleep in the hovel next door, and you're hoping to finish this plowshare before the cold forces you to stop. You wipe sweat from your brow, the hammer heavy in your hand, and keep forging, one strike at a time. The light hits the forge through a slanted window, turning the floating ash into something almost magical. You lean on your anvil, take a breath that tastes like warm pennies, and think, maybe today won't be so bad. And then the goat yoke guy shows up again. You eye the goat yoke like it personally insulted your family. It's splintered, crooked, and somehow still steaming from yesterday's rain. The owner, Barnaby, if you recall correctly, smells like wet straw and onion soup. He insists the iron brackets snapped on their own. You know better. The goat probably rammed a wall or a cart or another goat. That's not your business. Your business is to fix things that never should have broken in the first place. You bring the yoke to the bench, flipping it over and inspecting the crude iron straps. Handmade, of course, and by the look of them, not by you. Did your cousin Harold try reforging this himself, you ask? Barnaby just shrugs. He said he watched you do it once. You sigh again. You do a lot of sighing in this job, some days more than hammering. The yoke goes onto your work table, wedged between a pair of horn-handled clamps. You pull a bent bracket off and toss it toward the scrap pile. It lands on your apprentice's boot still attached to his foot. Still attached to his sleeping body. He grunts, shifts, and pulls the sheepskin tighter around his head. You let him sleep. He'll regret that when it's time to lift the pig iron. At your tool wall, you reach for a chisel. Not the small one, it's too blunt. Not the sharp one that's for noble commissions. The middle one, the one that's balanced just right in your grip, even though it's chipped at the handle and gives you a splinter every other Tuesday. You pry off the rusted nails, fit new strap iron around the wood, and heat it in the forge while Barnaby talks about his goat's love life in excruciating detail. Apparently, she's particular. Prefers dark-furred males. Kicked one straight in the jaw last week. You nod, hammer in hand, pounding the rivets into the yoke as he rambles. The heat from the forge presses against your cheek like the world's angriest hug. Outside, a rooster crows late and a wheelbarrow creaks by, probably the cobbler hauling leather scraps again. You can tell by the squeak. Historians still argue whether rural blacksmiths had more social standing than millers or bakers. You're in a weird middle ground. Everyone needs you, but no one quite respects you. You're the fixer, the furnace keeper, the soot-covered counselor, the village therapist who uses iron instead of ink. When the yoke is done, Barnaby pays you in what else a wheel of questionable cheese. You place it on the bench where it oozes slightly. A small fly makes itself at home. Great. You wash your hands in a wooden basin of water that was once clear. Now it's the color of oversteeped tea and smells faintly of egg. You wipe your hands on a rag that's more whole than cloth and realize, too late, that you just wiped cheese residue across your tunic. You've got a rhythm now. The fire, the clang, the occasional grunt. It's oddly meditative, like blacksmith yoga with more burns. You glance out the door and spot old lady Grenda wobbling toward you. She's carrying something in a cloth bundle. You brace for nonsense. I need a new hinge for my chicken coop, she says. But also, can you sharpen this spoon? She unwraps a spoon so dented it resembles a tiny shovel. You smile politely. What were you eating? Dried apples, she replies. Dead serious. You take the spoon, though you're not quite sure why. There's no technique for spoon sharpening. You file it gently, mostly for show. She nods with satisfaction and drops a single egg into your palm. Warm, possibly still in the process of becoming a chicken. You add it to the cheese wheel. It rolls off. At this point, your apprentice finally shuffles in, blinking like he's seen daylight for the first time in a century. His name is Ellis, but you mostly call him Hey or Not That One. He's 16, wiry, and full of opinions about metallurgy he learned from his uncle who once saw a sword. He yawns, sniffs the air, and asks, "Did someone leave cheese out again?" You glare. He shrugs and goes to the bellows. 2 pumps. A break. Then 3 more. Not bad, but not good enough. More rhythm. You mutter. It's not a dying fish. To his credit, he tries. But he's distracted by a beetle crawling across the coal bucket. You don't know why he's so fascinated. Last week, he named one Gerald and made it a saddle from twine. The next job is simple nail repair. The miller wants a set of horseshoe nails that don't bend like licorice. You roll your eyes but comply. You've made more nails than meals in your lifetime. They're deceptively tricky. Too thin, and they snap. Too thick, and they split wood. Your fingers move almost without thinking. Twist, cut, hammer. Quench. In the background, Ellis hums an off-key tune he swears is Norse in origin. You're not sure Norse people hummed. You don't correct him. He's finally working. The sun is properly up now, casting dusty light through the open shutters. You can hear the clatter of hooves, the gossip of market stalls, and someone shouting about stolen pears. You wonder if today is the day someone finally falls into the latrine pit behind the tavern. It's due. You package the nails, tie them with twine, and set this beside the forge. Another task done. Another quiet victory. Your hands ache, your tunic smells of smoked iron, and the cheese has mysteriously vanished. Ellis is chewing. You don't ask. You know the moment's coming when the forge turns from helpful companion to relentless tyrant. It doesn't take long. A few more bellows, a few more glowing embers, and the room becomes a sauna designed by a vengeful black dragon. You peel off your outer tunic. There's no modesty here, just sweat, soot, and survival. The heat is constant, not the kind that ebbs and flows, but the sort that wraps around your rib cage and refuses to let go. You shift your stance to avoid the hottest blast from the hearth, but the warmth finds you anyway, seeping into your boots, your back, your bones. Some say blacksmiths were blessed by fire gods. If that's the case, you'd like to have a word. Politely, of course. With a hammer, Ellis fans himself with a half-finished shovel. You hand him a water skin and remind him not to drink too much. Rationed water is the village norm. There's no plumbing, just a communal well. A lineup of gossipy old men. And that one kid who always drops a shoe in. You have another job waiting. A scythe blade for Farmer Winlow, who always insists it be sharper than my mother-in-law's tongue. You grin at that, only because it's the 5th time he's made the joke this month. You retrieve the blank iron, shape it over the anvil, and begin the slow, rhythmic process of drawing out the metal. This is where your body memory kicks in. Your arm swings with steady pressure. Your wrist flicks on the return. The hiss of the water bucket marks each successful bend. You're no artist, but your blades are known for staying sharp longer than most marriages. Still, the forge mocks you. It crackles, spits, and occasionally belches sparks toward your knees. Historians still argue whether medieval forges were more dangerous than wood-fired kitchens. Frankly, you think it depends on whether your apprentice is holding the bellows correctly that day. As you work, a thought crosses your mind: no holidays, no weekends, no Forge Appreciation Day. You work when the village needs you, which is always sick. You sweat it out, injured, Wrap it in linen and keep hammering. Exhausted. Welcome to the club. The door creaks open, and a new customer enters, young lad, missing a few teeth, holding what looks like a broken frying pan. My ma needs this mended. Said to tell you it's her favorite. You nod and take the pan. It's warped like a sailor's tail, dented in ways that suggest it's been used for more than food. Probably discipline. You reheat the metal gently, coaxing it back into shape with the flat of your hammer, and a bit of patience. It hisses, then sighs, then smooths. The boy watches, wide-eyed. You ever make swords? You nod. Made 5 last year? Ever use one? You pause. Only on pots. He doesn't know whether to laugh or be impressed. He settles for both. The pan cools quickly, and you hand it back, now smooth and round, albeit with a few extra hammer kisses. The boy offers a pouch of what else dried beans. You accept it graciously. They'll go nicely with your imaginary rice. As the sun climbs higher, so does the forge's mood. The fire glows white hot now. Even Ellis stops humming and wipes his forehead. You reach for the tongs, slide a red-hot rod into a molding block, and count to 5 before removing it. Timing is everything. 1 second too long, and it's brittle. 1 second too short, and it crumbles under pressure. Ellis nudges you. Why don't we ever make fancy things like crowns? You squint because nobody here has a head worth crowning. He laughs finally. It's a small victory. At midday, the town bell tolls. One low, groaning clang. Not for lunch, there's no such thing. It's just the church bell reminding everyone that time is moving, whether or not you eat. You reach for your midday ration, a crust of black bread and half a soft onion. You tear off a piece and offer the rest to Ellis, who pretends to hesitate before snatching it. You lean against the wall, grateful for the shade. Outside, life goes on, the shoemaker arguing with his goat, the baker slapping dough, a child chasing a chicken that clearly doesn't want to be caught. You smell rain in the distance, even though the sky's still clear. Years in the forge have taught you to trust your nose, especially when it tells you to cover the coal pile before the storm hits. A clang echoes from the corner of the shop. Ellis, curious as ever, is testing an old dagger blade by poking a turnip. You resist the urge to yell. Instead, you let the humor of it settle in. The mighty blade, forged in sweat and flame, dulled by root vegetables. You stretch your back, listen to it crack like a log on the fire, and roll your shoulders. You'll need to patch your tunic again, another burn hole. Right near the hem, there's a charm to your clothes, every rip a memory, every stain a story. That large one on your sleeve, soup accident. The darker one near your boot. Don't ask. The forge flares again. Brighter this time. You smile faintly. She's temperamental, but she's yours. Just like the burns on your hands, the ash in your hair, and the permanent scent of slightly scorched everything. The scythe is ready now. Sharp, curved, and quiet in your grip. You test it gently against a strand of straw. It cuts clean through. You set it aside. Another task finished. Another hour earned. You don't remember what your hands stopped feeling pain? Maybe it was after the 4th burn or the 50th smash knuckle. Now, heat just feels like pressure. And pressure just feels like another Tuesday. Today's Tuesday, by the way. You think Ellis is back to pumping the bellows, this time with something resembling rhythm. You nod in approval, which he immediately takes as permission to speak. Did you know, he begins, that some smiths in France were allowed to wear swords? You raise an eyebrow, curious despite yourself, because they made weapons for the king. He continues proudly, like royal armories and whatnot. Had uniforms and crests and everything. Huh. You grunt, twisting a horseshoe into place. I make spatulas for Widow Hensley. Closest I've come to a crest is the one on her cat's collar. Still, it's a fun thought you, in gleaming robes, a ceremonial hammer on your belt, perhaps a plume in your cap, then a flash of real life your apron, frayed and oil-stained, your sleeves singed at the elbow, and a splinter in your thumb that's been there since Candlemas. You return to your current project reshaping a door latch that's somehow been chewed on. By a person or an animal, you're not sure. The tooth marks are oddly uniform. You heat the iron. Listening to it ping softly as it warms, it's like a kettle about to boil, except this kettle might burn your eyebrows off. The latch reshapes under your hammer, smoothen into a functional curve. You dunk it into water with a hiss that makes Ellis flinch. Still skittish, that one. You consider telling him the story about the blacksmith in York who supposedly forged nails in his sleep. Historians still argue whether that tale was metaphorical or just deeply concerning. Outside, thunder grumbles. You knew it. Rain's on the way. You head for the coal pile, yanking a tarp over it just as the first drops begin to fall. Rain in the forge is both blessing and curse. It cools the air slightly but warps your wood and slicks your floor until every step becomes an adventure. Back inside, the air shifts. That wet iron scent settles in like an old friend with muddy boots. The fire dims a little, humidity does that. You stoke it harder, pumping the bellows until it glows again, though not without groaning. Ellis slips while carrying tongs and nearly takes out a basket of scrap. You say nothing. He needs to learn. The next customer arrives with a horse. You wince. You'd hoped today would be hoof-free, but alas. The universe demands variety. It's a tall mare, mottled gray, eyes wide like she knows exactly where she's going and isn't thrilled about it. The stable hand holding her reins is a kid, barely taller than your anvil. He offers you a sad look and mumbles. She needs new shoes, at least the front ones. You nod. The mare snorts. Shoe work is tricky, requires precision, calm, and a distinct lack of being kicked in the knee. You grab your hoof knife, a rasp, a clean set of blanks, and your thick leather apron. You talk softly to the mare, letting her sniff your glove. She flinches, then holds still. A small miracle. You lift the front hoof, clean it carefully. Ellis watches, fascinated. You show him how to hold the shoe in the fire just long enough to soften, but not so long it loses shape. He nods, finally understanding why last week's batch looked like spaghetti. As you hammer the new shoe into place, the mare jerks once, but you're quick. You dodge the swing, pat her shoulder, and finish the job with a few firm taps. The stable hand exhales. So do you. Payment, a bag of barley, and a nod. You'll take it. The rain's heavier now, drumming on the roof in a lulling rhythm. For a moment, it almost drowns out the crackling fire, the clink of tools, even Ellis humming a badly timed lullaby. You take a moment, sitting on the corner stool, stretching your back again. Every muscle feels like it's been lightly roasted. Your shirt clings to you, damp with sweat and the occasional drizzle that slipped through the rafters. You adjust your apron, now stiff with soot and streaked from the mare's hooves. Ellis breaks the silence. Do you think we'll ever leave the village? You glance over, caught off guard. What for? I don't know. He shrugs. Travel. Make swords for knights. Or go to the city. You chew on the thought. Cities are louder, dirtier, maybe richer, but they also demand faster work, more competition, and less kindness. At least here, you know whose hinge you're fixing, whose cat got stuck in what pantry, and who's going to ask you to make a spoon and not pay. I left once. You murmur for a market. Got food poisoning. Came back. Never left again? He laughs, of course, but it's the kind of laugh that says he's already dreaming of his own anvil. In some distant land where people thank you with coins instead of turnips? You don't discourage him. Not tonight. The forge hums again. You rise, rub your neck, and return to the fire. The next job won't do itself, and there's still that goat yoke sitting on the bench. Again, you take a deep breath, inhaling that comforting, awful mix of damp coal, iron filings, and something vaguely barnyardish. Probably the cheese wheel reincarnated as vapor. It's raining harder now. Fat drops slapping the packed earth outside and forming small puddles just inside the doorway. One has already claimed your left boot. You drag the goat yoke back into your lap like it's an overdue assignment from a very forgetful teacher. The straps you fixed earlier are holding, but the wood is splitting again. Probably because Barnaby stores it next to the fire like it's a family heirloom that needs to be toasted. You wrap new iron braces around the frame and call it done again. Ellis, meanwhile, is trying to fashion a ring out of scrap iron. He's humming again. This time something suspiciously close to a love song. Planning a proposal, you ask without looking up. What? No, he blurts. Going pink. I just thought I'd try something delicate. You smile faintly. You've been trying that since you reshaped that fork into a weapon of elegance. He groans. That was a salad fork. Was you correct? As the rain drums steadily overhead, you begin work on a more serious project, a sword blade requested by a retired knight? Well, retired is generous. He mostly sits in the tavern and tells stories that become more dramatic with each retelling. The first version had 3 bandits. The latest has 12, all with flaming axes. Still, the man has coin, actual coin. Not soup or root vegetable, so you agreed. The steel is good quality, a rare treat, and you've been itching to work with it all week. You start by heating the billet until it glows a soft orange. Not quite ready, but close. Ellis watches as you carefully draw it out on the anvil, tapping rhythmically, steadily. Sparks scatter like tiny fireflies, and the blade begins to take shape narrow, long, and surprisingly obedient. You ever use one? Ellis asks quietly. A sword, you say? Not breaking rhythm. No, I've made 10. Broken 3. Held a few. That's enough. He nods. Still think you'd look cool with one? You smirk. I trip on the scabbard and take out a potted plant. The rain thickens, washing the village in gray. You can hear shouting from the road, a cart stuck in the mud. No doubt. Someone curses. A donkey brays in sympathy. Inside, the forge feels timeless. You've seen 3 generations of this village pass through your shop. Kids who once begged for horseshoe nails now run farms. Some of your earliest work still stands gates, hinges, even a weather vane shaped like a goose that hasn't turned properly in a decade. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were artisans or laborers. You've never cared much. You're a bit of both, really. Artist when the iron's in the right mood. Laborer when the taxman comes calling. You work the blade into a fuller curve, heating and folding as needed. Ellis hands you the tools before you ask he's learning. Slowly, like bread dough in winter. Why don't we engrave it? He asks. Make it special, because then we charge more, you say. And Sir Embellishment will expect jewels next. Still, you mark a tiny swirl near the hilt. Just a flourish. For fun. For pride. The blade cools gently, resting in the rack. You'll finish the edge tomorrow, after it has time to rest? Blades, like people, need cooling down after a good hard stretch. Ellis brings over a bucket fresh water for quenching. It smells only slightly of cabbage. You use it anyway. Lunch never came. Not really. You munch on the last crust of bread and sip from the lukewarm ale hidden behind the coal sack. It's more backwash than beverage at this point, but it softens the burn in your throat. Outside, the puddles deepen. Rainwater slides down the side of the forge, soaking the scrap heap. A chicken takes shelter near the door, clucking like it disapproves of everything you've ever made. You wave it off, it flutters away, possibly to lodge a complaint with the baker. Ellis returns with a piece of parchment. This came earlier. I forgot. You glance at a note from the mayor's assistant, requesting iron nails for the schoolhouse bench repairs. Urgently. Of course, you've got just enough scrap left to make a batch. You toss it into the fire, pull out your nail-cutting chisel, and start pounding. The rhythm returns tap, cut, strike, quench, over and over, until your ears buzz and your fingers tingle. Ellis tries to match your pace with his own nails, but ends up with a jagged pile that looks like medieval porcupine teeth. It's a learning curve, he says sheepishly. More like a learning cliff. You reply, but with a grin. The sky starts to clear. A beam of sunlight pokes through the clouds and catches on the sword blade, making it gleam just enough to remind you that sometimes your work is beautiful. Not that anyone says so, except maybe the baker, who once said your hinges were not awful. You'll take it. The rain slows, but your forge roof hasn't quite gotten the message. A steady drip plinks into a rusted bucket near the back wall, your unofficial water feature. Ellis once tried to name it Sir Dripsalot. You pretended not to laugh. He brings it up often. You stretch your legs and groan as your knees crack, like someone breaking twigs. The fire is still going strong, your proudest and most demanding employee. Always hungry. Never says thanks. You decide to tackle the next job on the list, repairing a cracked cooking pot for the inn. It's iron, thick, and judging by the smell has recently been used for cabbage stew or something, pretending to be. You scrape out the residue with a rag and try not to gag. The pot's handles are wobbly, its base is warped, and there's a chip on the rim the size of a baby's tooth. You heat the damaged edge and start working the metal back into something resembling a circle. It resists. Old pots are stubborn, much like their owners, but you've wrangled worse. You remember the time someone brought you an entire weather vane shaped like a pig, insisting it needed to be made more aerodynamic. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths had input into local design choices. You suspect the answer is only when the customer forgot to care? You press the pot against the anvil, reshaping the edge with soft, measured taps. Sparks occasionally leap from the contact point, but you're used to the sensation. One lands on your forearm. You ignore it. Ellis leans in. You ever think about making armor? You glance at him. You mean real armor? Or the kind they wear in village plays? He grins. Both. You've dabbled. Sure, you once hammered out a rough breastplate for the constable's nephew, who wore it to 3 festivals and promptly retired after someone mistook him for a duck. It's not glamorous work, and it pays less than horseshoes. But there's something satisfying about shaping a chest plate, knowing it might someday deflect an arrow or at least a drunken swing. I'll think about it, you mutter, tapping the pot back into shape. As the metal cools, you plunge it into the quench bucket. It hisses angrily, steam blooming around your hands like a ghost from yesterday's stew. You set the pot aside and make a mental note to tell the innkeeper that if this thing cracks again, she should just turn it into a flower pot. Ellis wanders over to your tool rack, poking through chisels and punches. How do you even remember which tool does what, you smirk? Years of guesswork. And some scarring. The tools all have stories. That short-handled hammer, you forged it after the long one flew into the fireplace mid-swing. The twisted tongs made during your experimental phase, when you thought curves were the future of metallurgy. They're not. The flat-edged punch-a-gift from a traveling smith who traded it for a pair of hinges and half a loaf of stale bread. You hear the squelch of boots and turn as a familiar face steps in. It's Edith, the candle maker. She's soaked to the bone, clutching something wrapped in a wool cloth. She places it gently on the work table and unwraps it to reveal a candle mold. Cracked clean down the center. It fell, she says simply. You nod, inspecting the split. The mold's brass, an unusual material in this village. And expensive to boot. You haven't worked with brass in weeks. It behaves differently, less forgiving than iron. More prone to warping if you're careless. You heat your smallest forge pan, keeping the flame low. The mold must be mended gently, like coaxing a grumpy cat into your lap. You apply the heat sparingly. Use your soldering iron made from an old file and a dash of stubbornness and carefully reseal the crack. Edith watches, fascinated. You glance up. This your only one. She nods. If it breaks again, I'm back to pouring wax in soup ladles. Let's avoid that, you say, smoothing the final seam. When it's done, she smiles. She's one of the few who do. She offers a small jar of honey golden, warm and heavy in your palm. You nod your thanks. Genuinely. She hesitates. Do you ever get tired of it? You look around the forge. The soot. The smoke. The half-melted tongs. Ellis with his singed eyebrows and pockets full of beetle parts. Only when I forget why I started, you say. She nods and leaves with her mold tucked under one arm. You place the honey jar next to the barley from earlier. It's starting to look like a feast if you don't mind chewing for 3 hours. You pull out your broom and begin sweeping the metal shavings into a corner pile. Nothing gets wasted here. Even the smallest scrap might become a washer, a hook, or part of a latch. You hum softly. Not Ellis's Norse nonsense, just something rhythmic. The forge is quieter now, as if exhaling after a long fit. Ellis sits by the door, sketching something in the dirt with a nail. Probably another weapon fork hybrid. He looks content. You glance at the sword blade on the rack, now resting under a cloth. It's not finished, but it's promising. Like the day. Oddly enough, you wipe your hands, look around, and say aloud, "What's next?" The forge crackles. It always has an answer. The forge speaks again this time, in the form of Marjorie from the general store, barging in with a sour expression and a bucket of rusty nails. "These bent in the rain," she snaps, dropping them onto your bench like they've offended her honor. "I want ones that don't melt like licorice next time." You resist the urge to remind her that nails don't bend themselves, or that she asked for 30 in a hurry and paid with a single jar of questionable pickled eggs. Instead, you nod, gather the nails, and begin sorting them. Some are too far gone, twisted like a drunk trying to tie a bow tie. Others are salvageable. You'll reforge the worst and polish the rest. She stands there, arms crossed, watching like she's waiting for a dragon to pop out of the hearth. Ellis slips by with a coal bucket, wisely avoiding eye contact. He's learning. As you begin to heat the old nails, Marjorie leans in. "And make them fast. I'm fixing my shelves before the tanner's wife steals my flour barrels again." You say nothing, because flour-based revenge is not your department. The nails begin to glow red. You straighten them, strike them flat, and quench each with a hiss and a flick of your wrist. They land in a bucket like tiny soldiers lining up for roll call. Historians still argue whether medieval tradespeople were patient or just well-practiced at swallowing irritation. You suspect it's both, especially with customers like Marjorie, who leaves without a thank you but takes an extra nail for measuring. With her gone, the forge feels quieter again. Peaceful, in that ashy, muscle-cramping sort of way. You sit for a moment, letting your arms rest on your knees. Ellis flops down beside you, clearly exhausted from his daring coal bucket adventure. "You think people remember this stuff?" he asks, nodding toward the tools, the walls, the heat still pulsing from the hearth. You glance around. The forge isn't beautiful. It's cluttered, smoky, covered in a fine coat of iron dust and ambition. But it works, and it lasts. "Some will," you say. "The rest will step on a hinge we made and never think twice." He nods like that's the most profound thing he's ever heard. The bell over the door jingles again. You recognize the man immediately, Rudolph, the bishop's assistant, robes trimmed in gold thread that somehow stay perfectly clean, despite the fact he walks through the same mud as everyone else. He clears his throat, loudly. The bishop requests your skill. He declares to repair his ceremonial boots. You stare, then stare harder. "His boots, you ask?" "Yes," Rudolph says, with the gravity of a man delivering royal decree. They pinch, and the gold work on the toes is dented. He fears it undermines his holiness. You want to say, so do his sermons. But you don't. Instead, you motion for the boots, which Rudolph extracts from a cloth sack like they're holy relics. They are elaborate, gold-tipped, pearl-inlaid, and deeply impractical for anyone who has ever walked more than 20 steps without a carriage. You lay them on your work table. One toe is indeed bent, probably from tripping on his own ego. Ellis lets out a quiet snort and instantly pretends to sneeze. You heat a slender rod to reshape the toe gently from the inside. No hammer here, just slow pressure and a steady hand. The boots squeak as you adjust them, their gold caps soft and finicky. You should charge double, Ellis whispers. I should charge a confession. You whisper back. You finish reshaping the tips and press the inner leather back into place. No scorch marks, no slips. They're pristine. Rudolph examines them like they might reveal the secrets of the universe. They'll do, he says, which is as close to praise as you'll get from the clergy. He leaves a single coin, real silver, shiny, worth 5 jars of pickled eggs. You place it in your drawer and close it carefully. That's tomorrow's bread, maybe even cheese that isn't slightly translucent. Outside, the clouds begin to part. Slashes of blue sky peek through, sunlight hitting the forge floor in golden stripes. Dust dances in the light, shimmering like ash caught in a snow globe. Ellis is sketching again. This time, a sword. You glance over his shoulder and nod. Not bad, you say, needs a bigger pommel. He grins, erases, redraws. You ever think about branding your work, he asks. A symbol, like a little fox head, or crossed hammers. You've considered it. Once. Long ago. You etched a star into the underside of a gate latch. No one ever noticed. But the idea still lingers. Maybe one day. You hear footsteps again this time. It's Joss the candlestick maker, needing something sturdy enough to hold 6 tapers and still not tip over when the cat jumps on it. You nod, grab your tools, and reach for a thick rod of iron. The fire flares as you feed it again. Always hungry, but it gives back. 2. In heat, in light, in rhythm. You hammer once, twice metal striking metal, the oldest song you know, and the forge sings along. The tapers need a base. So you start wide flattening the bottom of the iron rod, like you're coaxing a stubborn biscuit into shape. Joss watches, arms folded, already critiquing in her head. She's known for 2 things having the steadiest hands in the village and the loudest opinions about stability. I just don't want another incident, she mutters. You remember the incident. Her cat Horace leaped onto her sideboard mid-supper, knocked over a candle, and nearly turned half her house into a tribute to Saint Flameout. She's understandably cautious. Ellis snickers softly at the memory and pretends to sweep, which is his code for eavesdropping with plausible deniability. You shape the base slowly, pressing the hot metal into a rough circle, and then punch a center hole for the taper post. It's not elegant work, but it's honest. Reliable. You remind Joss that you'll drill not 1, but 3 support holes through the base. Just in case Horace gets ambitious again. She nods approvingly. He's been bulking up. Caught a mouse the size of a potato? You wonder if that was a mouse or just a misplaced root vegetable. Either way, Horace sounds like a menace. The holder takes shape. Simple. Strong. You curl the arms with an iron hook. Elegant little spirals that no one will notice except the one who lights the candles. You do that sometimes small flourishes. Hidden dignity? It's a habit now, like wiping your hands on your apron before you even think about it. You quench the finished piece and set it gently in a pile of straw to cool. Joss inspects it, gives a satisfied grunt, and leaves behind a single jar of rendered beeswax. For your skin, she adds, wrinkling her nose at your soot-covered hands. Ellis perks up. Can I have some? Your skin's fine, you mutter. You're still made of optimism and grease. He laughs, and you're secretly glad. It's good to hear a voice in this forge that isn't the fire or your knees cracking. You move next to the horseshoe rack. It's looking a little bare. And you know the cobbler's mule will throw a shoe any day now he walks like each hoof owes him money. You grab a thick bar and begin forming the first curve. Horseshoes are bread and butter work. Unremarkable, but dependable. You've made hundreds, maybe thousands. Each one shaped by hand. No two quite identical. They're like fingerprints made of steel. Ellis, watching, asks, "You think the shoes actually bring luck?" You smirk. Only if they stay on. Historians still argue whether the superstition around horseshoes came from their crescent shape or the fact that blacksmiths were once considered magical. Something about the fire, the sparks, the way metal could be bent to your will, it all looked a little too supernatural in the old days. You never felt magical. Just tired. You finish the first shoe and dunk it with a hiss. The steam curls like a sleeping dragon around your wrist. You wipe your brow, only to smear more soot across it. Standard procedure. As you work on the second, you hear a ruckus outside. Shouting, hooves, and oh no, is that Sir Grumblefist? It is! He bursts through the door in full chainmail, which clinks like someone trying to sneak into a pantry with a bag of spoons. His face is red, either from exertion or anger. Possibly both. "I need this sword sharpened," he declares, slamming it down on your bench. Immediately, you look at the blade. It's nicked, bent, and somehow coated in what appears to be dried jam. Ellis leans in, squints, and whispers. Blackberry Grumblefist grunts. Bandit blood? You nod slowly. Right. Of course, the blade is a mess, clearly used to hack through something that wasn't armor. Possibly breakfast. You lift it, feel its balance pad. It pulls left, like it has commitment issues. Still, work is work. You grab your grindstone, start reshaping the edge. You know, you say casually, this would hold an edge longer if you didn't use it to chop wood. Or pies. He doesn't respond, just crosses his arms and watches. You grind slowly, rhythmically. The sparks fly again, bright against the dim forge light. The hum of the stone, the steady scrape, it's a sleepy kind of music. Ellis nearly dozes off, leaning against the doorframe. You nudge him with your foot. Grumblefist leaves with the blade, now sharpened to near perfection. He does not say thank you, but he also doesn't offer to pay in jam this time. So that's progress. You collapse onto the stool near the fire, stretch your legs, and exhale. The forge has quieted again, settling into that low, steady crackle that reminds you of an old friend humming in their sleep. Ellis sets down his drawing. This one looks like a shield shaped like a turtle. For defense and inspiration, he says proudly. You don't have the heart to tell him that turtle-shaped shields were once a real thing, at least in theory. Somewhere. Maybe. You stand again, stretch, and glance at the list of jobs. Only 3 left for the day. That's practically a holiday. Outside, the clouds have parted, the puddles shimmer. The village is returning to its usual rhythm. Chickens pecking, wheels creaking, gossip flying faster than arrows. Inside, the forge hums on. So do you. The afternoon light stretches longer now, casting angled beams across the floorboards, lighting up stray particles of soot that dance in slow spirals. You lean over the workbench and drag the back of your wrist across your forehead again. More out of habit than necessity. Sweat's already dried there, replaced by the fine grit of metal dust and humility. Ellis is poking around in the scrap pile, fishing for treasure. He's got an eye for odd bits, broken rivets, twisted nails, warped washers, things most people would throw out. He hoards like a raven with a blacksmithing fetish. His latest discovery, a bent iron bar that he swears could be repurposed into a hinge and a trap for mice. You tell him to label it and put it in the maybe box. You've got a whole shelf for maybes. Your next task. The bishop's tax marker? A cruel little tool with a long handle and a tiny branded seal at the end. It's used to mark crates of tithes grain, eggs, textiles, whatever the church decides is owed. Apparently, the old marker was too gentle and not leaving a lasting imprint. You're to make a firmer one. Of course, you heat a fresh rod and prepare to carve the bishop's seal into the end, a stylized sunburst with a tiny cross in the middle. It's delicate work. Surprisingly so, requiring a chisel, a steady hand, and the patience of someone who doesn't immediately flinch at the smell of singed holy linen. You concentrate, each tap deliberate. Why don't they just stamp it with ink, Ellis wonders aloud. You pause because ink washes off. You mutter, but a scar stays. He blinks. That's poetic. Dark, but poetic. You finish carving the sunburst, then reheat the end and test the marker on a strip of dry wood. The emblem comes out clean, crisp, a little smug. You wrap the handle in leather, polish the tip, and set it aside. Somewhere between tool and threat. As you clean up the workbench, Ellis offers a cup of water. You sip it slowly, eyes closed for a moment. You let the warmth of the forge wrap around your shoulders like an old blanket. You forget, briefly, how much your feet hurt. Until you step down and land on a nail. Not hard, not deep, but enough to spark a creative phrase you mutter under your breath as you hop once on your good foot. Ellis heroically doesn't laugh out loud. You sit back down and pull off your boot. The nail's embedded in the sole one of yours. Obviously, a callback from earlier. You smile, a little bitterly. We really do leave our mark. Huh. He nods solemnly, handing you a pair of pliers. Once patched, you limp slightly over to the back corner where the large orders are stored. Among them a rusted gate hinge for the widow Malkin's back garden. 2 fireplace pokers for the tavern they keep going missing. Probably repurposed as skewers, none? And a large metal hoop that no one remembers requesting, but no one dares throw out in case it turns out to be a sacred object. The pokers come first, simple rods with a loop at one end and a flattened tip. You knock them out quickly, heat, bend, hammer, quench. Ellis takes over polishing them with a strip of leather and beeswax from Joss's earlier gift. As he works, he asks, "You ever think about what happens to this stuff after it leaves?" You shrug. Some of it breaks. Some of it lasts longer than we do. He considers that. You ever wonder if any of your nails are holding up the town? You glance around. At least 3 houses and a bridge. If they're still standing. He whistles low. You're in more places than you walk. Historians still debate how much medieval towns relied on one blacksmith. You don't... You know, if your forge were to go cold for even a day, the village would begin unraveling quietly. Comically, but undeniably. Hinge by hinge. Shoe by shoe. The fire needs more fuel. You motion to Ellis. He lifts the lid of the coal bin and begins refilling the hearth. You watch the flames shift, deepen, roar. The light flickers across the walls, bouncing off tools like dancing shadows of past jobs. The bell jingles again twice in one day. A record. This time it's Thomas the schoolmaster. Frazzled, dusty, smelling faintly of ink and hopelessness. He carries a bell small, cracked, with a handle that looks chewed. He sets it down gently. Do you fix bells? You examine it. Bronze, thin, cracked clean at the seam. I can reforge it. You say? It won't sing quite the same. He nods. Neither do I. You chuckle, and he smiles, tired but real. You melt the bell's edge, reshape it slowly, tap the crack into submission, and let it cool. It's not perfect. It wobbles slightly, but when you test it, it gives off a small, clear note, like a whisper with conviction. Thomas beams. Thank you. He leaves behind a small bundle of pages for kindling or reading. He jokes. You take both meanings. Ellis flips through and finds a half-finished poem about clouds. You hang the bell near the door before Thomas can change his mind. It rings as he exits. A better chime than before. The forge sighs. So do you. And with that, the day grows thin. Morning comes again, far too soon. You don't need a rooster. The forge wakes you. Its smoldering coals still pulse faintly from last night, casting a dull red glow in the darkness. The air's heavy with that familiar mix of burnt oak, hot iron, and yesterday's sweat. It smells like work. You sit up slowly, muscles groaning in protest. You slept in your boots again. It's not your best habit, but it saves time. Ellis is still cocooned in his blanket like a very flammable caterpillar. You give him a nudge with your foot. He groans. Progress. Outside, it's foggy. The kind of mist that makes trees look like ghosts and makes every sound feel closer. You open the shop door to let in a little fresh air, but it smells of damp leaves and wet wool. Still, it's better than forge breath. You grab a handful of oats from a jar and chew slowly as you prepare the fire. You've got a full day's work ahead. Tools to mend, requests to finish, and something vaguely ominous involving the bishop's new gate latch. As scribbled on your list, your first visitor of the day isn't a customer, it's Gertrude, the town gossip, bearing not work but news. She totters in holding a basket of half-finished socks and immediately launches into the latest drama. You didn't hear this from me, she begins, which always means you absolutely will. But Marjorie's second cousin swears she saw a knight riding off with the blacksmith's daughter. You pause mid-stoke. Which blacksmith? She narrows her eyes. You're the only blacksmith. Dear, you blink. I don't have a daughter. She nods gravely. Exactly. You decide not to ask. It's too early. You let her ramble while you heat a steel rod to begin shaping into a plowshare. She eventually leaves a small bundle of mending 2 iron buttons and a thimble cracked in half. You promise to fix them. She promises to bring more news. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths served as social hubs or merely tolerated the chatter of the village. You don't argue. You know. Ellis finally stumbles in, hair sideways, shirt backwards, and somehow chewing on an unidentifiable root. He goes straight to the bellows like a man making peace with his fate. Today's main order is from the tanner. He wants a new leather punch. The last one snapped in half like a biscuit, he said, Though you suspect it was misused on something closer to bark than hide, you take a thick, short iron rod and begin to taper one end to a point. The forge breathes harder now, its fire fed by fresh coal and Ellis's sleepy determination. The punch must be strong, but not brittle. You temper it carefully, dunking it between bursts of heat and hammering. Do you ever want to make something just for fun? Ellis asks between yawns. You look at him. He shrugs. Like a metal bird? Or a crown? Or a wind chime? You think, I once made a spoon that sang when it stirred soup. His eyes widen. Really, you nod? Didn't do it on purpose. He's silent for a beat, then still counts. You finish the leather punch and add a simple groove along the side for grip. It's not fancy, but it'll last longer than the tanner's current sense of humor. You set it aside and feeling the warmth in your hands fade as the tool cools. The bell over the door rings again this time. It's a group of kids holding a wheelbarrow with a bent axle. We were racing, one admits. With what you ask? Each other. Another chimes in. And a goat? You sigh, inspect the axle. It's a simple fix. But you admire the craftsmanship of the disaster, how they've managed to bend a solid bar into what can only be described as a question mark. Ellis helps hold the wheel while you straighten the axle on the anvil. The goat outside bleats like it disapproves of your methods. You tap the metal carefully, working the bend out, then reinforce it with a bracket. The boys cheer. The goat sneezes. You send them off with a warning about racing uphill. They nod as if they'll listen. They won't. It's nearly midday now. You reach for your lunch, 2 crusts of bread and the last of the honey. Ellis watches as you portion the honey carefully, spreading it across both pieces with a blacksmith's precision. You ever think about retiring? He asks. You raise an eyebrow. And do what I don't know, he says. Fish sleep. Tell stories. You chew for a moment, then reply. The forge doesn't retire. It just gets passed on. He looks thoughtful. You pretend not to notice the way his back straightens a little afterward. Outside. The fog is lifting. You can see the far side of the square now, market stalls reopening. Townsfolk moving slowly, carts rattling along. The world is waking up again, and in the center of it all, quietly humming, hammer in hand, soot on your brow, you still working, still needed, still here. The sun is finally up enough to warm the windows. Though you don't need its heat, your forge supplies more than enough. Still, the sunlight filtering through the smoky glass makes the whole place feel momentarily sacred, like a shrine to rust and routine. Ellis is humming again. This time, it's a tune from the tavern, something about a sailor and 3 turnips. You don't ask. You're back at the anvil, shaping a new hinge for the chapel's side door. It's a peculiar one, thin but long, meant to pivot on a carved stone frame that's never quite square. You've reshaped this hinge 3 times already and fully expect to do it again. Halfway through, the mayor's assistant wanders in. He's a narrow man with narrow shoes and even narrower patience, always carrying a ledger, always pretending he hasn't already forgotten what he came in for. He clears his throat. We're needing an iron bracket to hold the town's new message bell. You pause mid-swing. Another bell. He nods, as if you might argue. This one's for emergencies. What kind of emergencies, loud ones? You sigh, set the hinge aside, and begin measuring out the iron for the bracket. It's not difficult work, just repetitive. But the mayor wants it decorative. Of course, something with flair. The assistant says, so the people know it's important. You give him a look that says, iron doesn't do flair, it does function. He gives you a look that says, I get paid either way. You compromise by adding a single curled end. A flourish. It'll hold a bell and look like it tried to attend art school. Ellis watches your process closely, asking now and then about the angle of the twist, the thickness of the support arm. You answer patiently. He's picking it up faster than you expected. Historians still argue whether smiths passed down techniques formally or just let the apprentices figure it out with bruises and burns. You're doing a bit of both. As the assistant leaves without offering payment. Of course, he reminds you, the bishop wants his gate latch by this evening. You nod, though your teeth grind slightly. The bishop's gate is a heavy thing, half wood, half ego. He wants a latch that looks holy but keeps the poor out, as he so eloquently put it. You suspect he's more worried about goats than people, but either way, it needs to be sturdy. You pull the iron rod from storage, thick as a wrist and twice as unforgiving. The design is simple, a pivot bar, a hook arm, and a ring handle. The challenge lies in making it look sacred. Ellis suggests adding a tiny cross to the end. You oblige not out of reverence, but because it'll shut the bishop up. You shape the latch, piece by piece. First the bar, then the hook, then the curl of the handle. The forge roars back to life. Sensing the heavier task, you work slowly with rhythm and intention. There's something about building a latch. It's a quiet promise, a pact that something will stay closed when it's meant to, and open when it must. You quench the last piece and test it on the shop door. It swings open, clicks shut with satisfying finality. Ellis grins. It even sounds important. You wrap the latch in cloth, tie it with twine, and hang it by the door for delivery. You'll let the assistant pick it up and pretend he made it happen. By now, the light through the windows has shifted less golden, more white, casting clean lines across the workbenches. You feel the day stretching ahead, but the hardest work is behind you. You take a moment, leaning against the anvil, your arms folded, just breathing in the forge. There's still that undercurrent of smoke and steel, but now it's joined by the sweetness of beeswax, the coppery note of iron filings, and something almost fresh. Ellis must have opened the side door. He's standing in the frame now, looking out toward the market square. You know, he says softly, sometimes I think the whole town spins around this forge. You chuckle. It limps around it. Maybe. But he's not wrong. You've mended the tools that plow the fields, sharpened the blades that butcher the meat, built the hinges that hold the tavern doors, the locks on the storerooms, the rods that stir the candles. You are the town's quiet fulcrum, and every hammer strike is a small prayer for things to hold together one more day. You sit again, wiping your hands. Ellis brings you a cup of water, and you clink it against his with a grin. To gates that close, and boots that don't. He laughs. You both sip. The forge crackles softly. Outside, a cart creaks by, a baby cries, a dog barks half-heartedly. Inside, everything glows. You think you're done for the day. You really do. Then the door swings open again with a dramatic flourish. Only one person in the village ever attempts Caleb the minstrel. a walking loot case with a flair for dramatics and exactly 0 sense of time. He's carrying what appears to be the remains of a music stand. You say remains because it's clearly snapped in half, twisted sideways, and partially burnt. Possibly by design. He drops it on your workbench and sighs loudly. A tragedy, isn't it? Ellis stifles a laugh. You pick it up and turn it over. Did a bear try to learn loot? Caleb gasps. No. The innkeeper stepped on it. Mid-performance. Right as I hit my emotional peak, you mutter something about structural integrity and start examining the wood shaft. The joints are sheared, the hinge screws stripped, and the iron base warped into a wobble that could double as interpretive dance. You decide to reinforce the lower half with a new bracket, file down the twisted arm, and replace the hinge entirely with one of your spare drawer pulls. It's unorthodox, but sturdier than anything Caleb's owned. He watches your every move like you're performing alchemy. As you drill and rivet, he begins humming, then singing softly. Ellis leans over. Do you think he knows he's doing that? No. You whisper. And we're going to let him keep doing it. When the repairs are done, Caleb clutches the stand like it's been resurrected. You're not just a smith, he proclaims. You're a sculptor of second chances. You raise an eyebrow? That'll be 2 candles or 1 very quiet ballad. He laughs, promises both, and breezes out into the street, knocking over Ellis's bucket of nails on the way. Of course. Ellis sighs. We should have charged him extra for poetic damage. You sweep the nails, return to the bench, and spot something waiting for you, a horseshoe order again. This one's from Nora the seamstress. Her donkey's back leg has a wobble, and she insists the previous shoe squeaked like it was hiding secrets. You select a thicker bar this time, one that'll hold its curve better on uneven terrain. As you work the shape, Ellis joins in without asking, holding the metal as you twist, passing the tongs before you even call. The rhythm between you is smoother now. Practiced. You're getting good. You admit. He nearly drops the hammer. Really not great. Just good. Still, his smile is wider than the forge door. The donkey shoe is cooled and set aside. You mark it with a small notch just under the curve. Almost invisible. It's something you've started doing recently. A quiet signature, not for glory, but for yourself. A little reminder I was here. I made this. It matters. Historians still debate whether medieval smiths marked their work deliberately or out of habit. You're doing both. The afternoon fades toward evening. The air cools as the forge slowly winds down. You don't feed it any more coal. It's time to let it rest. The flames shrink into a soft orange cradle. The shadows stretch longer, and the smoke rises slower now. Ellis sits by the door, turning a small iron loop in his hands, practicing a weld with a small torch. He's focused, calm. You let him be. Instead, you return to the sword blade from earlier. It's resting now, polished, sheathed in linen. You give it one last glance, testing the weight, the balance. It's not just a weapon, it's a record of your patience. You hang it on the finished rack, beside other pieces, tools, and parts waiting for pickup. Each with a name tag Malkin. Grumblefist, Tanner, Chapel, Seamstress. All small lives made a little stronger by your hands. You stretch again, slower this time. The day's labor is etched into your joints. You don't complain. You just notice. Outside, the air is still. A breeze picks up faintly, tugging at the edge of the roof where you've meant to patch the leak for 3 seasons. Maybe tomorrow, you check your stock nails. Blanks. Rods. Enough to get you through the week if no one breaks a wagon axle. Which, of course, means someone will break one tomorrow. Ellis joins you at the rack, placing his loop beside the others. He's marked his too with a crooked E stamped near the joint. You say nothing, but nod once. Then you both sit. No words. Just the soft crackle of dying fire, the sigh of bellows exhaling their last breath for the day. A chicken clucks outside. A lantern flickers in a neighbor's window. The forge is still warm, but not demanding. Just there. Like you, the stillness that comes after the forge cools is unlike any other part of the day. It's not silence, exactly. There's still the occasional groan of old wood shifting, the faint tinkle of tools settling on hooks, the distant clip-clop of a cart making its final round through the village square, but it feels like silence. It wraps around you, inviting your bones to unclench and your thoughts to soften. Ellis has taken up the broom again. He sweeps with a little more intention now, gathering iron filings and bits of slag into a neat pile in the corner. It won't stay neat for long, but it's the effort that counts. You watch him work for a moment, then go to the back shelf where the unloved projects live. There's a drawer of them, half-forged hinges, cracked ladles, tiny metal hooks bent the wrong way. They weren't failures exactly, just misfires. You pull out a stubby little candle snuffer you once tried to make in the shape of a flower. It looks more like a squashed beetle, but it fits nicely in your hand. You run a cloth over it absently, feeling the cool metal smooth under your fingers. It's strange what you grow fond of. Tools, scraps, odd bits that never found a home but somehow still belong. Ellis finishes sweeping and comes to stand beside you. You ever keep any of it? You shrug. The rest ends up in something else. He turns the snuffer over. This one looks like it's smiling. You squint. It does in a melted, lopsided sort of way. You let him keep it. The bell over the door rings again softly this time, like even it knows the hour's late. A young woman steps in, wrapped in a gray shawl, holding a bent iron spindle. She's quiet, polite. The spindle is her grandmother's. She explains, and she wants it straightened. Not because it's useful, but because it was hers. You nod, take it gently, and motion for her to wait. It's a delicate fix. The spindle's thin and brittle with age. You warm it only slightly, just enough to soften its resistance, and use a narrow hammer to guide it back into form. You brace it against the anvil, moving inch by inch, letting the metal remember what it was. When it's done, she smiles and tucks it back under her shawl like it's a baby bird. She offers a slice of dried pear in return. It's tough, chewy, sweet, delicious. Thank you, she says. For remembering old things still matter. You nod. So do hands. She leaves. The bell chimes once more and falls silent. Ellis munches on the last of the pear and sits near the coals, staring at the fire's soft pulse. I think I'm starting to get it, he says. Get what this, he says, waving at the whole forge. Why it matters. Why people show up with broken things. Why you keep making the same hinge over and over again. You nod slowly. Because everything breaks. And everything's worth fixing. Eventually, he grins, even me, especially you. The forge is mostly dark now. The last coals glow like fireflies behind bars. You toss in one small scoop of ash, not for heat, just for tradition. The fire sighs, rolls over, and goes quiet. There's nothing left to fix tonight. You begin your end-of-day routine. Tools checked, tongs hung, scrap sorted. Ellis folds up his blanket near the cot. He's stopped asking whether he can sleep here. He just does. You don't mind. The forge is big enough for 2 tired bodies and more than a few loud dreams. You glance around once more. The sword from earlier gleams faintly in its cloth wrap. The bishop's latch, delivered. The donkey's shoe, perfectly curved. The bracket, the hinge. The spindle all done. A full day. Not perfect, but whole. You light the lantern near the door and watch its glow settle across the walls. Soft and sleepy. The forge looks different at night, less a workplace, more a sanctuary. The shadows aren't as long now, they're restful. Ellis yawns and pulls the snuffer from his pocket, placing it beside his pillow. You blow out the lantern. The room dims, and for a moment, nothing moves but the air. You lie back on the cot, boots still on, arms folded behind your head, eyes tracing the ceiling beams that creak gently as the night air cools them. Ellis is already half asleep on his bedroll, curled around the beetle lantern snuffer like it's a rare artifact. The forge is quiet now. Really quiet. The kind of stillness you only earn after a day that started with cracked yokes and ended with rescued spindles. A breeze slips under the door, brushing your cheek like a whisper. It smells faintly of damp earth and old leaves. Somewhere out there, a dog barks once, then silence again. The village is resting. And so, finally, are you... You think back through the day, not in full stories, but in snapshots. The hammer's rhythm, the hiss of quenching steel, Ellis dropping the coal bucket, Caleb's operatic meltdown, the bishop's fussy boots, the spindle that mattered to someone. That's the thing they never tell you about blacksmithing. It's not just about fixing what breaks. It's about catching people in those quiet moments when something small matters more than it should. A spoon, a shoe, a squeaky hinge that won't let someone sleep. You remember the time years ago when you forged a gate latch for a woman whose hand shook too much to lift the old one. You designed it with a longer handle. She cried when she tried it. Called it graceful. That was before Ellis, before the current forge cat, maybe even before you started wearing gloves. Historians still argue whether the blacksmith was a craftsman, a healer, or something else entirely. You think maybe they were just someone who paid attention. Ellis turns over with a soft grunt. The coals give one last snap, like a sleepy farewell. You close your eyes. Your shoulders relax. Your jaw unclenches. Even your boots seem to sigh. The forge will need you tomorrow. But not yet. Not now. And now, as the fire fades and the forge settles into slumber, you begin to feel the weight of the day unravel gently from your limbs. Your fingers, stiff from hammering, begin to loosen. Your breath falls into a slower rhythm. The sounds of the village fade to soft echoes, distant laughter, a door creaking shut, the low rustle of wind slipping through empty alleyways. The iron tools on the walls no longer demand attention. They rest, just as you do. Quiet, satisfied, still warm in places, like memories cooling down after being shaped into form. Your cot is firm, but familiar. The straw pokes a bit, But even that is part of the comfort now. The air smells of old soot and burnt oak, but beneath it, the faint sweetness of beeswax and dried pear lingers. Your legs stretch, your hands rest, your eyes grow heavier. Ellis breathes slow and deep, and you listen. It's not loud, not bothersome, just a rhythm beside your own. Like twin bellows easing the forge from flame to ember, the world shrinks, gently, until it's just the forge, the warmth, the flicker of memory and muscle, and the slow, steady fall into sleep. There's nothing left to do tonight, nothing that can't wait until morning. So let go. Let your body settle. Let your thoughts soften. Let the forge hold you quiet, warm, unchanged. You've done enough. And now rest